Picture a mom standing at her kitchen counter at 7:15 in the morning, lunches half packed, one shoe missing somewhere under the couch, phone buzzing with a school pickup reminder she hasn't had time to answer. And underneath all of it, there's this quiet hum of math running in the back of her mind. $40 sitting and checking, 6 days until payday, and a mental spreadsheet trying to work out if that's gas money or grocery money, because right now it genuinely can't be both. That's not a dramatic moment. Nobody's crying at the counter. There's no bailiff at the door. It's just an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that never makes it into anyone's highlight reel, but that so many moms know in their bones. I talked to a mom once, I'll call her Rachel, though that's not her real name, who described that exact scene to me, right down to the $40. What struck me wasn't the number. It was that she told it to me like it was nothing special, just Tuesday. She mentioned, almost as an aside, that the night before, she and her husband had had one of those tense, quiet arguments couples have over a credit card statement. Not shouting, just that flat, exhausted tone of two people who love each other and are both scared about money and don't quite know how to say that to one another. She told me she remembered standing at the sink afterward, doing dishes in the dark because she didn't want to turn the light on and see her own face. She wasn't telling me this as a rock-bottom story, some dramatic before and after. She told it to me as just the ordinary, unremarkable starting point of the year she and her husband quietly started doing things differently. And 3 years after that morning at the counter, they'd saved $80,000. Not from a windfall, not from a promotion or an inheritance or a lucky stock pick. From habits. Small, boring, repeatable habits that most people would scroll past if you listed them on their own, but that stacked up, one on top of the other, into something that actually moved the needle. Before I get into the list, I want to say something, because money and motherhood get tangled up in some genuinely heavy stuff. Shame about not doing enough, comparison with the family down the street, that gnawing feeling of, why can't I just get this right? If any of this is landing a little close to home, I want to be really clear about something. What I'm walking you through today is a relatable framework, not a clinical or diagnostic take on financial trauma or anxiety. I'm not a therapist, and this isn't therapy. I'm someone who talks to a lot of moms about money and has noticed patterns worth sharing. So if something here touches a nerve, that's okay. Take what's useful, leave what isn't, and be gentle with yourself either way. Okay, 15 habits. Let's walk through them the way Rachel walked me through them, including the parts that didn't go smoothly, because I think that's the part that actually helps. The first thing she told me she did sounds almost too simple to matter. She started writing down where every single dollar actually went. Not budgeting yet, just watching. For 1 full month, she kept a notes app open on her phone and logged everything. The coffee. The school fundraiser envelope she said yes to without thinking. The quick run into Target for one thing that somehow became 8 things. She told me the hardest part wasn't the tracking itself, it was the honesty. There was a real temptation, she said, to leave things out, to round down, to quietly skip logging the thing she felt silly about buying, but she pushed through it, and at the end of that month, she added it all up and saw that $11 here, $6 there, had quietly become $340 she couldn't previously account for. That number is what flipped something in her. Not guilt, clarity. You cannot redirect money you cannot see, and for the first time in years, she could actually see it. Once she could see where the money was leaking, food turned out to be the biggest hole in the bucket. So habit 2, she started planning meals a full week at a time and batch cooking on Sundays. Picture 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, kids underfoot, a pot of chili going on the stove, a tray of chicken roasting in the oven, the whole kitchen smelling like garlic and cumin. And by the time dinner rolls around, she's got 4 nights of meals already portioned into containers in the fridge, labeled in Sharpie so future her doesn't have to think at all. That one habit alone cut her family's takeout spending by more than half. Because if you really look at it, the enemy of a food budget was never the grocery bill. It's the 5:45 p.m. moment of pure exhaustion. Kids hanging off her legs, one of them melting down about a lost sock, when ordering delivery feels like the only survivable option left. Remove the exhaustion decision in advance, and you remove the spending that comes with it. Third habit, and this one's old school, but she swore by it: cash envelopes for groceries and what she called fun money. She'd withdraw the week's grocery budget in actual cash, and once that envelope was empty, that was it. No dipping into the card just this once. No telling herself she'd make up for it next week. There's something about physical cash running out in your hand that a declining number on a banking app just doesn't replicate the same way. It's tactile. It's visible. It stopped what she called the slow bleed. All those small swipes that never feel significant individually, but absolutely add up by the time the month closes out. About 3 months into all of this, she told me, something small but important happened. She checked her savings account and saw just over $500 sitting there, money that 3 months earlier simply would not have existed. She said she actually took a photo of the balance on her phone, which felt a little silly, but she wanted proof for herself that it was real. It wasn't a huge number, but it was the first time in years she'd felt like the ground under her feet was solid instead of shifting. That's around when Habit 4 came in, and she told me it changed everything for her family's peace of mind. Sinking funds. Instead of treating the dentist bill, the school field trip fee, or the kids' birthday parties as sudden emergencies, she opened a handful of small, separate savings buckets and fed a little into each one every single week. $10 here, $15 there, nothing dramatic. And here's the part of the story that really tested whether any of this actually worked. About 5 months in, their water heater died. Completely suddenly on a Thursday. In the old version of their life, she said, that would have been a full-blown crisis. A fight, a scramble, probably a credit card swipe they'd regret for months. Instead, she went and looked, and there was money sitting in a home repairs sinking fund, not quite enough to cover the whole thing, but enough that the gap left over was manageable instead of catastrophic. She told me she actually cried a little in the plumber's driveway, not from stress this time, but relief. That's the entire purpose of a sinking fund. It takes the unpredictable disasters of parenthood and turns most of them into non-events instead of emergencies. Fifth habit, before buying anything for the kids brand new, she checked secondhand first, always. Consignment sales twice a year, local buy-nothing groups on Facebook, hand-me-down chains with a rotating circle of other moms. She described standing in line outside a consignment sale at 6 in the morning with a travel mug of coffee, and another mom she'd befriended through the group, both of them half asleep and strangely delighted about it, trading tips on which bins had the good snow boots. She told me something that stuck with me ever since. Kids grow so fast that most secondhand baby and toddler gear is barely used before it gets passed along. Somebody else already absorbed the depreciation on that stroller or that coat. Why would she pay full price to absorb it again? That one mindset shift, buying used first as a default rather than a last resort, probably saved her family a few $1,000s a year all on its own. Habit 6 ties directly into that one. Instead of buying new toys to keep the kids entertained, she joined a toy swap group with a handful of other local moms. Every few weeks, bags of toys would physically rotate between houses. And here's the thing nobody tells you. To a 3-year-old, a new toy that's actually just been sitting in someone else's closet for a month feels exactly as exciting as one fresh off a store shelf. The novelty is the same. The price tag isn't. It also quietly solved a problem nobody talks about in these lists. Clutter, fewer toys coming into the house permanently, more freshness without more spending, and a lot less stepping on stray plastic in the middle of the night. I want to pause here for a second, because we're roughly a third of the way into this story, and I don't want to just breeze past it. If this kind of content is actually landing for you, The real specific, here's what genuinely happened stuff, rather than generic budgeting advice you've heard 100 times. This channel exists entirely for that. Money, for moms specifically, covering the stuff mainstream finance content usually skips right over, the messy parts included. If that's useful to you, hit subscribe so future stories land in your feed automatically, because I've got a lot more of these lined up, and I'd genuinely love to have you here for them. Okay, back to Rachel. Habit 7. One evening, after the kids were finally down, she sat with her bank statement and a highlighter and marked every single recurring charge, streaming services, an app subscription she'd genuinely forgotten existed, a gym membership for a gym she hadn't set foot in for 4 months. She said it was almost funny, in a not really funny way, how much money had just been quietly running on autopilot without her noticing, month after month, like a slow leak in a tire she hadn't checked in a year. Picture that highlighter moving line by line down the page, and the moment of realizing she was paying for 3 different streaming platforms when she only actually watched one of them. That single audit freed up close to $80 a month. Money that had been leaking out for over a year before she even looked. 8th habit, and this one tends to surprise people. She picked up the phone and called her insurance provider, her internet company, and her phone carrier, and simply asked whether there was a better rate available. She told me she rehearsed the sentence in her head before dialing, feeling a little silly about it, like she was asking for a favor. Nothing dramatic happened on the call. No aggressive haggling, just a polite question. Is this actually the best plan for what I'm using, or is there something cheaper? More often than not, there was. These companies rarely reward loyalty, but they do respond to someone asking. That one small habit, repeated maybe once a year across a handful of bills, added up to genuine, recurring monthly savings, without her having to give up a single service she actually used. Habit 9 was a bigger commitment, one she and her husband actually had to agree on together. They kept driving one reliable, fully paid-off car for years longer than most people around them would. No upgrading the moment a shinier model came out. No financing something flashier just because the monthly payment seemed manageable on paper. Picture the neighbor pulling into the driveway next door with a brand new SUV and Rachel pulling in right beside them in the same sedan she'd had for 6 years. Paid off, cheap to insure, running just fine. She told me there was a moment early on where she felt a small sting of comparison watching that SUV pull in. But she said that sting faded fast once she started actually watching the number in her savings account climb instead. That's the entire difference between a car payment quietly eating into savings every single month and that same amount of money going straight into an account with her name on it instead. Somewhere around the 1-year mark, Rachel told me, they hit $10,000 saved. She said she and her husband didn't do anything extravagant to market. They couldn't really afford to. And also, that wasn't the point. They ordered a cheap pizza, put the kids to bed a little later than usual, and just sat on the kitchen floor together looking at the account balance on her phone. She said it was the first time in their marriage that money had felt like something they were building together instead of something they were constantly fighting about. 10th habit, she leaned hard into things that were already free, hiding in plain sight. The library, not just for books, but for museum passes, story time, even seed exchanges in the spring. Community centers running free or low-cost classes for the kids. Local parks instead of paid indoor play places on weekends. It's easy to assume free automatically means lesser, but she told me her kids genuinely couldn't tell the difference between a library craft hour and a $25 sensory class at some franchise. They were just as delighted either way, and the money she wasn't spending on entertainment went straight toward the savings habits we're about to get into. Habit 11 is one of the most important on this whole list. She automated a transfer into savings for the exact same day her paycheck landed, before she could see that money sitting and checking and start quietly making plans for it in her head. Even when it started small, $50, $75 a paycheck, the automation itself mattered more than the amount. Picture the money moving before your brain even has a chance to register that it was there at all. That's the whole trick behind this habit. Willpower is unreliable, especially at the end of a long day with 3 kids demanding dinner. A standing order to your bank, on the other hand, never gets tired, never has a bad day, never talks itself into just this once. Habit 12. She made absolutely sure she was contributing at least enough to her retirement account to capture her employer's full matching contribution. She told me, half laughing, that it took her embarrassingly long to realize that not doing this was essentially turning down money that was already part of her compensation package. Money that was hers for the taking and she just wasn't taking it. This habit isn't glamorous. It doesn't feel like savings in the moment because it's tucked away out of sight in a retirement account rather than sitting visibly in a checking balance. But over years, that employer match compounding quietly in the background became a genuinely significant chunk of that eventual $80,000 figure. 13th habit, she started doing a small amount of freelance work in the evenings using a skill left over from her job before kids. Nothing dramatic, just a handful of hours a week. She wasn't trying to build some empire or become a full-blown entrepreneur. She was simply trying to create one more small stream of money that could flow straight into savings without ever touching the family's regular day-to-day budget. Picture one quiet hour after bedtime, laptop open on the kitchen table, the house finally still, doing something she already knew how to do instead of scrolling her phone on the couch out of sheer tiredness. That's really all it was. Small, unglamorous, consistent. And every dollar of it was extra, on top of everything else already happening. Habit 14. Every so often, maybe once a quarter, she'd run what she called a no-spend week. No takeout, no impulse purchases, no just one little thing picked up at the store. Groceries and gas only, and otherwise working with whatever was already sitting in the pantry and freezer. She said it was never framed as punishment in her house. It was more like pressing a reset button, a chance to notice, once in a while, just how far they could stretch what they already had when they were paying close attention. Usually it knocked loose another $100 or so that went straight into savings. And the 15th habit is the one I think gets skipped over in almost every frugal living list out there, and it might honestly be the most important one on this entire list. She kept a small fund that belonged just to her. Not the family's fund, not the kids' fund. Hers. For a haircut, a coffee out with a friend, something small and completely guilt-free. She told me there was a period, maybe 8 months in, where she cut this out entirely to save faster, and it backfired. She started resenting the whole process, felt invisible inside her own budget, and one weekend blew through nearly $300 on things she didn't even really want, just because she needed to feel like a person again instead of a walking spreadsheet. That was the moment she brought the personal fund back, and never cut it again. Frugality that leaves zero room for the person actually doing all the budgeting, all the tracking, all the meal planning, tends to collapse eventually. That small personal fund wasn't a leak in the plan. It was the pressure valve that made the whole plan sustainable enough to actually last 3 full years. By the time Rachel told me all of this, they were sitting at $80,000 saved. She said the number itself was almost beside the point by then. What had actually changed, she told me, was quieter than that. She and her husband didn't have the tense, silent kitchen sink arguments anymore. She didn't feel her stomach drop when the mail arrived. She slept better, and she said something that really stayed with me. She wanted her kids to grow up watching her handle money calmly, not anxiously, because that's the thing they'd actually absorb, more than any number in an account. So that's the list, 15 habits, and I want you to notice that not one of them was flashy, and not one of them required a 6-figure household income or some lucky break. Tracking every dollar, meal planning and batch cooking, cash envelopes, sinking funds for the predictable surprises, buying secondhand first, swapping toys instead of buying new, auditing every subscription, actually asking for a better rate on the bills, keeping one reliable paid-off car, using what's already free, automating savings the moment money lands, never leaving the retirement match on the table, a small side income built from a skill she already had, occasional no-spend weeks to reset, and protecting one small fund that's just for her. None of these habits on its own gets a family to $80,000. I want to be honest about that. But stacked together, repeated quietly for 3 years, through a broken water heater and a rough patch where she almost gave up on the one habit that turned out to matter most, they added up to a completely different financial reality than the one that started at that kitchen counter with $40 and 6 days left until payday. If you're standing in your own kitchen right now, running that same math in your head, feeling like the mail might hold something you don't want to open, I hope this gave you somewhere real to start. Not a total overhaul overnight. Just one habit this week, maybe 2 next month, and a little more breathing room than you had before, and maybe eventually a quiet Thursday evening on the kitchen floor with someone you love, looking at a number that used to feel impossible. If you want more of these, real stories, honest habits, money made simple for moms specifically, without the shame and without the jargon, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.